Welcome to lesson 3, coaching presence. In coaching, your presence is sacred. You can't let anything interrupt your focus. And there's several reasons for this. One, coaching does take a lot of mental energy because you need to be fully present for your client, really hearing what's going on with them, hearing their dreams, their vision, their fears, the obstacles that might be in the way. And it's impossible to do that when you're distracted by other things. You've probably had the experience of talking to someone and recognizing that they weren't fully focused on you. And what happens when that happens? There's a very good chance that you don't share as much, that you disengage a bit, that you feel a bit disappointed because you don't feel fully heard or fully listened to. It happens every single day because we live in a world where multitasking is the norm, where we are constantly bombarded with messages and notifications and things trying to get our attention. And so it's easy for that to become the norm. But here's the thing, as a coach, you cannot let that be your norm. You have to show up in a completely different way. In fact, people should experience that almost immediately when they engage with you in communication. And I say that in a general way, not just your clients, but you're out in the world talking about coaching. People should experience that when they talk to you, they feel heard in a way they don't feel heard in regular conversations. Here's the thing, most of us rarely have the experience of truly feeling heard. We simply don't. And even when someone is hearing us, we rarely have the experience of the conversation being all about us, right? In our regular relationships, that wouldn't be good. The conversation is not always going to be about us. But in coaching, this is part of what makes it so unique, so appealing and attractive to clients. It's a place that a client can go and feel heard and to know that the entire conversation is about them, their vision, overcoming their obstacles and their fears, and they don't need to feel any guilt about that because that is the way it's supposed to be. So as the coach, your presence is so very important to this, that you're showing up ready to hear with no distractions. So being fully present, first of all. That means you have shut down those outside distractions. Perhaps if you're sitting in your office and the computer's nearby, you've put it on sleep mode or you've turned off email notifications. Because even when we have the best of intentions, when those notifications come through, they automatically grab our attention. So it's so important for us to make a decision that we're showing up fully present. I am here for this client. The client is paying for me to be fully present, but I'm also making that decision to be fully present. Sometimes that means having a few moments before you even have a coaching session to just stop and breathe and intentionally get yourself focused. So you want to be fully present, but secondly, you want to be client-centered. This means you're entirely focused on the client and their experience, not on yourself. So in the last lesson, we were talking about differences, for example, between mentoring and coaching. And often mentoring is focused a lot on the mentor, being able to share their experience and their opinions. But in the coaching session, we're more interested in the client and the client's experiences and the client's perspective and helping them come up with the solutions and the answers that they need. Understanding their experiences helps us understand the context of the goals that we're dealing with and why the vision is important. It's not that we never ever talk about ourselves in a coaching session, but it should be rare. And we'll talk in a future lesson about when those occasions are appropriate. But for now, just make the decision to be client-centered. If you're fully client-centered, you are naturally going to be pulled forward and understand what kinds of things you should be asking the client. You're going to be noticing things that you may even bring up to the client that sometimes lead to breakthroughs you wouldn't even be expecting. So you want to make sure you're client-centered. Third, no distractions. So you may need, if you're working from home, for example, as most coaches probably do, to make sure that if there's anybody else in that house, they understand how important coaching presence is. That there can't be any knocking on the door, getting your attention, oh, I just have a quick question. None of that. That is completely unprofessional in the coaching context. It is so very important that you, in advance, eliminate as many distractions as possible. And when there are people in your environment, that you actually have a conversation with them about why this is so important and how it can actually disturb the flow of a coaching session when there are distractions. You know, I've been coaching since 2002, and I honestly can only think of one time when I had a distraction that was so urgent that I had to tell the client to hold on. I had left something on the stove and I heard it pop. Like I was boiling eggs and I heard the egg pop and I was like, oh no. And so, you know, if there's an actual emergency, yes, you have to stop the coaching session. But I point that out because it should be extremely rare. If that happens once, you certainly don't want it happening again in a future session, because what it's communicating to the client is that they are not at the center of the coaching session, that your coaching presence is not fully there. Fourth, you want to listen with all of your senses. And what I would suggest is that you start practicing that just in your everyday conversations. So when I say listen with all of your senses, I'm saying you're listening mind, body, and spirit. You are listening with your ears, but not just the words that are being spoken. You are listening to the hesitations. You are listening to how quickly someone is talking. You're listening for excitement or anxiousness in their voice. All of those things are communicating something to you. You may be listening with body, and when I say that, I mean you might even ask the client as they're describing something that is, you know, producing fear in them. Where do you feel that, right? Because they might feel that tension in their shoulders or it might be in the pit of their stomach. You're really helping them to articulate what's going on. So you're listening with everything. Visually, if you're coaching in person or you're doing video conference, you may notice body language, but you might not ever coach that way. In all of my years of coaching, I've coached pretty much exclusively by phone. And I've had people ask, how do you do that? And how do you stay fully focused? I find it very easy. I often close my eyes when I'm coaching. I hear things that I wouldn't hear if I was watching. I get distracted more when I'm watching. I've tried video conferencing and coaching, and for me, it just doesn't work. There's a lot more to manage. I'm managing how I look. I'm looking at how they look. Sometimes the technology isn't working. But for others, they feel completely at home and they actually coach better in that way. So you have to figure out what works best for you. But understand that there are many levels of being able to listen, and you want to be listening with all of your senses. That also means that you are listening with your own intuition. Sometimes you sense things that don't even feel like they make logical sense, but don't ignore that, because oftentimes that is information. It might be a clue in the coaching conversation that creates a breakthrough. So you are fully present. When you're fully present, you'll be noticing all of these things. You'll be listening with all of those senses. But the fifth way that we make sure we show up with excellent coaching presence is that we are open and we are curious. Open meaning that we are listening for what that client is saying, but we're also open for different ways of getting to a goal. We're not rigid that just because I've always done it this way, this is how the client has to do it. So the client may present ideas that you haven't thought of. And that's great, because what you really want is for them to feel motivated. And when it's their idea, they're going to be most motivated by it. You want to be able to be curious. And so we're going to talk even more in depth about the power of curiosity. But for now, I want you to honor curiosity. I want you to cultivate it. I want you to notice what the client is saying. I want you to notice how they say things. I want you to be curious about why their goals are so important to them, because all of those things will be powerful in helping them design the kinds of plans that get them to the goals and the vision that's most important to them. So remember that coaching presence is very different from how we show up in everyday life. It's all about the client. That's what they are there for. That is the purpose of the session. It's really not about us. And quite frankly, that's very freeing. We get to focus completely on them. But we need to be fully present. We need to eliminate those distractions. We need to listen with all of our senses. And we need to be open. There are many pathways to goals. And we may have one or two or even three, but you know what? There might be 4, 5, 6, there might be 15 other ways to get there. And when we're open, we often help the client find the best possible pathway for them. So get ready to simply show up with the maximum amount of presence. Hold it sacred, and you will find that clients will continually be attracted to having you as their coach, because it's the one place they can go and fully and completely feel heard.